Morning, and welcome to another edition of the Astro Weather. Man, I got big hair today. Look at that shit. It's a little out of control. I find it hard sometimes to schedule haircuts. I do, because I'm always so busy. It's one of those things where if I had a rich person's privilege, somebody come here and cut my hair. That's the only thing. That would be the only rich privilege that I think I would want, is to have a stylist come to me and just every couple of months, just a little snip. Anyway, how is everybody? Good morning. We're back for another edition of the Astro Weather. And today is the 23rd of February, and we are seeping into Pisces. Can you feel it? A lot of high strange happening. We had a plane crash yesterday at Clinton Field in Ohio, supposedly carrying a number of people who were there for the big spill in East Palestine and working for the EPA. We'll have more on that over on 15 minutes after this show at 9/11 Central Standard Time. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to get into the Astro Weather. And I did a pretty deep dissertation yesterday for about the first 10 minutes on the nature of Pisces and the end of the Piscean age, which we are clearly arriving at, and the high strange that awaits us in the not so distant future. The event horizon is really upon us at this point. And of course, it's going to be a crazy month with Saturn going into Pisces. And then later in the month, we have Pluto going into Aquarius, and our first glimpse at the quote unquote new age. I'm sure it will be quite revealing in its own way. Last night, I don't know if you caught it. I tried to get a picture of it, but the moon and Jupiter and Venus were just in this beautiful alignment in the sky last night. Really beautiful. It was like the moon was sort of dripping these two pearls coming off. Really stunning imagery. And you have that crescent moon, that Shiva moon that the moon is at right now. So it's still going to be around. And I would, before the moon gets too bright, I would go outside tonight if you're in an area where you can step out and check out this wonderful celestial phenomena. It's really, really gorgeous. And something you don't see very often, So indulge in it a little bit. Step outside the horror, and take in a little bit of beauty, and be bedazzled by what awaits you in the evening sky. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about where we are today. Jump right into it. We still have that Sun-Saturn conjunction, and the sun, hanging out there and almost playing the singleton role, where it's standing out, but also standing alone. And we have more of what we had yesterday, right? But at some point, that sun is going to start to interact with some other aspects. One of them is clear now. We do have a sextile with the sun and the true node being in Taurus, almost like it's like an island of sanity, the true node in Taurus. And we're getting ready to say goodbye to the nodes. That'll happen in July. I think it's around July 25th. We have this nodal shift, and that true node goes into Aries. And man, are we going to be fired up during that true node in Aries? And especially with the South Node in Libra, and for all the crimes that have not been adjudicated and judged and ruled upon, I think people are going to take justice into their own hands with that true node in Aries. Just saying. But there can also be a very powerful sense of initiative and doing things on your own or getting things started. People, I think, are getting the picture that the governmental systems are not really working last night, this is just a little aside, and I'll jump back into the Astro Weather. Last night I was watching Jason Whitlock, and he had a young guy on there. It's a very, very interesting interview. It's about 35, 40 minutes long. And this young guy goes by King Randall. And he is 24 years old. And he started his own boarding school in Vernon, Georgia, which apparently is a pretty rough place. And he just said, screw it. I'm going to take these boys. It's for boys. I'm going to take these boys in and I'm going to bring them to my boarding school. And he's got a 9-bedroom, I think 4-bathroom house that's been in the family for a long time down in Vernon, Georgia. So him and his family are basically raising these boys and doing just absolutely yeoman's work. And one of the things that he was really clear on is like, I'm doing all this myself. I don't take any grant money. I don't take any foundational money. I work all the jobs to pay for the schooling of these boys. And it was really an amazing interview. And then I realized that he's Gen Z, Pluto and Sag. I think he's 23 years old. So that's Gen Z. And I've been saying this for a while about Gen Zs, that they will create the new philosophical foundation for the world. That's what they're here to do. After it all falls, Gen Z will create the new philosophical foundation of the world. And he's got these 13, 14-year-old kids who, of course, are Gen A, and basically he's training them. And that generation, that Pluto and Capricorn generation, will build the new world. So you have to have the philosophical foundation. You have to almost have like the founding fathers. And then you have to have the people that will construct and build the new world. And there will be a new world. It will happen. And it will happen regardless of what the powers that supposedly be in Davos are proclaiming. But that's a little bit off script. Let's get back into what's happening astrologically. All right, so we have Mercury now. It's clearly in second decan. And that second decan is clever. It's Gemini's decan. And now we have a straight trine, 17 degrees to 17 degrees. Thought moves into action rapidly. So if you have an idea, if you have a thought, if you have something that pops up in your light bulb above your head, act on it. Because here we have Mars in the Libra decan, and then we have Mercury in the Gemini decan. So this is interesting, right? And Mars here in the Libra decan is good for being able to do it with another person, completing the circuit, completing the loop. So if you have a brainstorm and you need to act on it, and there's somebody that can help you achieve whatever you need to achieve with that, do it. And vice versa. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, look, I got an idea. Do you want to execute this together? This is the day, right? This is the day to put things into action. Thought becomes action. Even in air, thought becomes action, right? Everything starts in the ethers. Everything begins as an idea and is drawn down into physical manifestation. So this is one of those days where things can happen very, very quickly. Very quickly. Let's stay with Mercury for a little bit here. We have a nice sextile to the moon. We have a nice sextile to Chiron, and we have a nice sextile to Juno. Hey, the moon is just right out of the new phase. So it's a early crescent, thin crescent. And when you get into the moon during that phase, it's a catalytic phase. And that's a phase where you can initiate things. So the initiatory energy today is quite high. And even though we may still be feeling a bit disconnected here and moving away from structure and order that we've become familiar with, maybe too familiar with, clearly it is a day where there's a lot of mental activity and a lot of opportunity to start new projects. The moon isn't quite new, but it's right at that phase where it's new enough. And we see Mercury in this celestial dance here. And at that Gemini, it's on the Gemini decan, right? So in the Gemini decan, it moves even faster. Clever. There's a clever energy in the air today. And even with Mercury squaring Uranus, I don't think it's necessarily bad. If you break with convention, it could be a good thing. Not everybody's ready for ideas that break convention. I think if you have Mercury square Uranus in your chart, you may be a little ahead of your time. You may have the idea, but it just may be too early, which could be frustrating in some ways. But I think the antidote for that is to not give up on your ideas, is to kind of keep them in the back burner and just keep them, like when you cook some meat, right? You don't want to burn it to have it right over the flame. You just put it on the back of the grill so that it can stay warm. And at some point you can bring it back over and hit it with that flame and get that nice crisp or char on the meat. I think that's the antidote for Mercury Uranus. Also, things that you say can and will be shocking, and today is one of those days. And we are when you get into Aquarius, you're into the news pocket too with Aquarius. Back in the day when we had just analog television and analog radio, those were waves, right? Those were waves. Those were analog waves, and those waves are not too dissimilar from the Aquarian waves of the water bearer. They're just different kinds of waves. So Aquarius was always associated with traditional legacy media in that regard, right? Now, of course, we have Aquarius connected to things like the internet, social media. The 11th house has really expanded its definition over the years. So when we do look at Aquarius, we can relate it to the news, right? The town crier, the person who's in the public square, who's basically telling what's going on that day in the town or in the village. And we are in a global village, and Aquarius is playing that role. So there's going to be shocking information today. And if you're somebody who's invested in waking people up, that Mercury Uranus square, it could be your ally, or it could be your foe if you try to wake up the wrong person. So shake things up a little bit today. Sometimes you want to lean into transits, and with all this positive energy with Mercury, lean into breaking things up, break up the routine a little bit, shake things up so that you can, get your synapses and your brain, firing again, right? So this is a good day for that. We have Mars kind of moving into that tighter square with Neptune. And I would say over the course of the next week, one of the things that we need to pay attention to is demoralization and feeling as if, there are things that are happening beyond our control that we can do nothing about, and can be very disempowering when you have that Mars Neptune square. Keep an eye out for that, whether it's in your own life or whether it's kind of going on in the world, right? The greater world around you, because the hits just keep on coming. The other thing that's interesting, and this is in light of what my little cruise through Twitter, is that they just released a bunch of January 6th footage. That is a Mercury Uranus square right there. It goes from who was it? I guess it was Kevin McCarthy who released that stuff. And now it's Tucker Carlson. And a lot of the footage is disturbing. It's like they have all these people that are gathered there at the White House, or the Capitol building, not the White House, but they're gathered there, and they let them in. And by the way, why does the Capitol have 17-foot high doors that are made out of brass? It seems a little excessive, doesn't it? So we could look at that Mercury Uranus square in the light of what's happening with this information that's being released. There's not a lot of Earth today. We have all this fire, Venus, Vesta, Jupiter, Chiron, the moon, Juno. It is lining up. It is the heat parade. And a lot of it actually, does really good astrological math, the sextile to Mars. Today is a day that's filled with energy, activity, mental stimulation, kind of breaking your routine, and even standing alone if you have to. We still come back to that Sun-Saturn conjunction, Sun separating and pulling away. So you may have to stand alone and stand out for your ideas or your connections, how you perceive things, how you initiate things. Today's a good day to initiate. Really good day to initiate. The moon, by the time we get into tonight, we'll move into a tighter square with Pluto. And that brings up some interesting issues. Moon Pluto square, dealing with things like resources, assets. Could it have any impact on overall economic markets, situations that are going to impact the rest of them? Maybe because the moon is security. The moon is security. And when you go into the moon Pluto square, what's happening here is your security is being threatened. People have to deal with the intensity of Pluto. It's taking your emotions hostage and taking them into the underworld. This is an aspect that shows up in women's charts. Right? We have a moon Pluto square. It's the aspect of the underworld and being taken into the underworld and hanging out with Pluto, right? Pluto or Hades. And this is a very interesting aspect in a woman's chart. They have to be able to resurrect their emotions, and literally they have to escape hell. I mean, I've seen this quite a bit with the moon Pluto square. So there's some of that later tonight. And in the dark of night, because, well, it's still kind of full moon, new moony, that energy might come up, right? That kind of intensity, that kind of anxiety, that kind of dealing and wrestling with your emotions is certainly in the air, but you don't have to stay there long. Aries is all about war and addressing conflict. So conquering your emotions, facing your fears is a good thing. It's a very good thing. And with Mercury in Aquarius, you can write this stuff out easily. So if you hit a wall tonight, if you hear news or something happens to you where it's triggering your emotions, your safety, write your way out of it, address it. This is a really good time to engage with Mercury. Mercury is your ally. Okay. Persephone is the character I was thinking of with that moon Pluto square. I've seen it. You have to resurrect your emotions from the underworld. All right, let's get into the start of the day. So I struggled a little bit with the start of the day. Wasn't a great day. It really was not a great day. Like, really? Who do I pick today? I find with Pisces that there are days where it's just full, right? Full with people. It's I was like yesterday, I could have picked, any one of 4 or 5 really interesting people. And I settled on that Claude Ted Kennedy. And today, hardly anything. And it's like, that's very Piscean. It's the water is, full. It's at maximum level, or else it recedes and there's nothing there. And today was one of those nothing there days. However, I did manage to find one candidate, and might be one of the most important people in history. This person is responsible in a lot of ways for the structure and the order of the world that we're living in, and not always in what I would call a positive light, but influential to the core. And in fact, one could make a case that the world as we know it wouldn't exist without this person's deeply influential involvement. Who am I talking about? Who am I referring to? I should have like a sound effect for the star of the day. It's Meyer, Amschel, Rothschild. Yes, the omega point for the Rothschild empire and dynasty begins with Meyer, Amschel, Rothschild. And his famous quote, "Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws." Yes, Rothschild begins a very agnostic approach to money and power. And when you look at our political landscape, it is really dominated by that philosophy and maxim. Both the left and the right fall under the rubric of this philosophy and the people that donate on both sides. Look at Sam Bankman-Fried from FTX. He donated equally to Democrats and Republicans. So this has been the philosophy and the mindset from the period of time when Meyer, Amschel, Rothschild emerged from the ghettos of Frankfurt to be able to engage with the royalty and nobility of Europe and make them a shit ton of money. So what does this chart say about him? I don't have the time. You know, when I do these stars of the day, I try to find a chart that's an A or a double A chart. This is an X. So there's no birth time for Rothschild. And so I did my best to put one together here that I think would speak in a lot of ways to who Rothschild is. And we can still glean quite a bit from this chart. So I chose Aries rising. And the reason I chose Aries rising is because it put the true node at 22 degrees in Taurus in the second house. Money, 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 money. And then we have the South Node and Pluto in Scorpio. Of course, they didn't know about Pluto then. They couldn't see it. It was a mythological character yet to become a planet. Now, when we see that South Node in Pluto, I don't know what he's pulling from in terms of his theoretical past life or where he's done this before, but clearly this could acknowledge some foreknowledge, some genetic coding that made Mr. Rothschild, also known with the last name as Bauer, very good at what he does, right? Scorpio's other people's money. And even with the retrograde, when the famous story, and I don't know how true the story is in terms of how they got the information, right? But the famous story with Rothschild was during the Napoleonic Wars. And there was, this great battle, I believe it was Napoleon versus Wellington, right? Or was it Wellington or Cromwell? I was going to get those two guys mixed up. And they're waiting for the results of this war because the fate of England and all of Europe depends on who wins this war. It's like a football game. It's like a fucking football game. Pardon my language. And apparently the Rothschilds had courier pigeons. So they knew who won the war, and it wasn't Napoleon. And word got out that the English had lost the war. And it started, and I'm sure that they were more than happy to throw a little kindling on the fire of gossip and misinformation and innuendo. In the market, in the exchange, all these stocks were being sold because the English believed that the market was going to crash based on the fact that they had lost this war, this battle and the war. And the Rothschilds knew different, but they didn't say anything. And so what they did is They were buying as people were selling, and they had a war chest to buy. And by the end of the day, when word came out that the English did indeed win, the Rothschilds had cornered a majority stake in the English stock market at that time. And that's a Pluto retrograde. So it's basically profiting off of other people's misfortune and misinformation. And as the story goes, that becomes the bedrock of their fortune. It's kind of like when Soros played the English silver market. There's echoes of that with the Rothschild story. So we can see this here, right? We can see it all happen in this grand trine, and using Neptune in a lot of ways, right? Intuition. I would say Rothschild, in as much as he was very good and very clever with the whole money game, that he also had a high degree of intuition. And I would even say psychic awareness. Anytime you get into a Mercury Neptune trine, Venus Neptune trine, Sun Neptune trine. So there's a lot of potential here to pull from that Plutonian underworld, South Node, priority experience, the money mastermind, right? It's all here in this grand trine, and then it all manifests down here. What's also interesting is you look at Algol. Algol was around 22 degrees during that time. So that's interesting, right? So his true node is conjunct this fixed star that is connected to things like disasters and beheadings. And if you look at what happened during that rush in the English stock market, everybody lost their head. They lost their head. They didn't know what was going on. All they knew was that England had lost the war, or so they thought, and they lost their head. And what did he do? He profited off of people losing their heads. And when the smoke cleared, the family had enriched their fortunes tremendously. He has this moon in Aquarius, which is very detached. And speaking of the moon Pluto square, there it is right there. And I think in this case, that moon Pluto square allows him to take advantage of economic situations without feeling a whole lot of guilt. I don't think that moon in Aquarius is going to really deal in a lot of guilt, especially when it's dissipative, especially when it's balsamic. It's like, the public good, I'll let that go. It's another version of the balsamic moon, maybe not as flattering. Another example here of his chart that we can see is the lightning fast Mercury sextile to Uranus. And even again, being exemplified by that story that I was talking about. But then there's also this idea that there would be theoretically innovative ways to interact with the Mercury Uranus sextile. And clearly, that happened. You know what's interesting about Rothschild's chart is Rothschild is kind of like a millennial. Pluto in Scorpio, Uranus in Capricorn. The only thing we're missing here is Neptune in Capricorn, and he's millennial 1.0. But we see Neptune here in the opposition in Cancer. So what we know about the millennials and their energy, it's very intense. It's very black and white. It's either in or out. And my experience in general with the millennial energy is the intensity and the desire to burn it all down. That's the nature of Scorpio here. And Rothschild has some of this in his chart, but it's not like an out of control fire. Oh, it is a very controlled burn inside the Rothschild chart. Here we see Mars in Leo approaching Saturn. And what is Leo? Leo's royalty. So he has access to the courts. Here we have Saturn, Jupiter. And even here with Saturn, Jupiter, we can see this model, right? Where Jupiter is theoretically a gateway or portal of opportunity to hierarchies. And then here with Mars, right behind Saturn. And Saturn rules. Saturn rules. Doesn't matter what sign it's in. It's a sign, it's a planet that is connected to hierarchies and rulership. And so here with Mars and Leo, Rothschild performs the role of the power behind the throne, the power behind the hierarchy, and making that group much more wealthy. And the other thing too, with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, he can make money coming or going. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And again, we see Jupiter retrograde. I'll take a stab at this and say it's the ability to profit off of somebody's misfortune. And then we have a yod here with Uranus and Saturn, Mercury. So again, this is putting things into action and having information in a lot of ways that other people just don't have. It's a very interesting chart. And I think we can get a sense as to at a kind of topical, I don't want to use the word superficial, but at a topical level, we can see how this works clearly, because looking back, the markers are here. So there you go. There's your star of the day. Guess we could call it a dark star of the day. Meyer, Amschel, Rothschild. All right. Thanks for being here. As always, I'd like to remind you, and a lot of you are starting to come over to 15 Minutes of Flame, which is great. So I'm going to put that graphic up there again, 15 Minutes of Flame. We go live. And some people have been saying that some of the playback has been challenging on the site. Well, I just want you to know that I also record the shows on Rumble. So I'm live streaming simultaneously on 15 Minutes and on Rumble. So you can always find the shows afterwards on Rumble. And it's 15 Minutes of Flame on Rumble. It's real simple. So you can go there live if you want to, or you can join our group where there's always a robust discussion happening. And then lastly, we have my sponsor, the person that I love working with, and that's my buddy Chris with True Hemp Science. If you look in yesterday's comments, somebody was singing the praises of his products and even had the schedule where they use certain things throughout the day, which is fantastic. So that's always the best form of advertisement, you know, when people can actually testify for the product's quality and efficacy. And you know, I'm a believer. And there are a lot of other people who have had very similar experiences with this product. It works. Some CBD stuff doesn't work. And if you're committed to it and invest in it, it's part of your health regimen and program, you'll see some results. So if you're interested in getting free product when you order $100 or more from truehempscience.com, just type in 15MINS, 15MINS, that's 15 mins, and Chris will throw you some free product. And if you spend $150 or more, you'll get free shipping. All right. Thanks for being here. Thanks for checking in with the Astro Weather. I hope it's been helpful. Please join us at 15 Minutes of Flame at 9/11 Central Standard Time. And everybody have yourself a wonderful and blessed day. Take care. Bye for now.